All right, you maggots, listen up. This is some more information on toroid coils or toroidal cores, Q factor. Those are the words you have to put in when you go searching. The other thing, remember I said I realized that the larger toroid core had better Q on the meter. Well, I went looking, I found an actual chart, and they actually said that the larger toroid cores have a better Q. See, once you have the answer, you work backwards and find the information. You just don't always find it when you go looking. You find verification of what you figured out. So I started putting a lot of things together. Now, when they in the little boxes they say high Q. All right. Well, how high? They don't say. So I found it. I kept digging and I found it. Okay, it's a higher Q than a multi-level coil of the same size. So it's a little misleading when they keep telling you a toroid coil has higher Q. It's not. It hasn't been defined. Well, it has higher Q versus a coil of the same size that has multi-layers. In other words, it might have a ferrite rod and then multi-layers wrapped around that and to make a choke. And that Q is going to be really crappy. But a toroid coil, because it's a donut, is going to have better Q at that frequency than the piece of ferrite rod that has multiple layers of wire. So I went looking, and what I realized in life, there are these voids or gaps of information. And someone will say, why? Why doesn't something work right? Now, I always tell you, the R71A ICOM radio has terrible audio. First of all, it's because it's a communication radio. Then I went digging. I basically took one apart, and I started putting signals through it and following it through. And I found out that the tone control is the wrong value. It's 10K. It should be 100K. So when you turn the tone control off on R71A, it's still on, and it makes the audio very muddy, and it gives you a headache. Now, there were companies that came out with all kinds of changing the capacitors to polystyrene and stuff like that, and it was bullshit, total bullshit. Well, I stayed with it for two weeks, and I was posting my information on a group, and of course they went after me. You know, this is the reason. I found the reason. The tone control is on. So what I come up with, it's still on the internet under eHam review. I put a thing in there. You go in and you take this one jumper off, and it disconnects the tone control. And you hear how good the audio could be out of the R71A. So with that in mind, you start thinking, well, why do certain communication receivers have really good audio? Now, when I hung at the shortwave store, the Kenwood R5000 had dynamite audio. When you listen to the BBC or something like that, you didn't get a headache. And if they played music, it sounded pretty good. But when you went on the R71A, it was muddy. It was a narrower IF, and the same with the JRC. So I said something, and their tech that comes in and does modifications on the radios way back, he said to me, he says, the bandwidth is wider of the IF and everything of that radio because I got to think about the name of it, the Kenwood R5000, it's designed for shortwave listening. So let's say the bandwidth of a shortwave station is 6 kilohertz wide. The Kenwood R6000 has a bandwidth in one of the selections that's exactly that. So when you go to wide on a Kenwood R5000, it's going to have the best sound compared to the ICOM, which is basically a ham receiver that comes with a transmitter. They took it out and put it separately and let you buy just the receiver, and they pass it off as a shortwave listening radio, which it's very, first of all, they messed up the tone control, and the IF cans and all that's very narrow. And it's a dual conversion, gets even narrower. See, it's made for RTTY, CW, and sideband. It's not made for AM. Now, follow the AM guys, AM phone guys. That's what they actually call themselves, the AM phone guys. They'll tell you certain older tube sets have incredible audio, and they do, because the IF cans, the bandwidth is exactly, say, 6 kilohertz. So the AM guys, they use a lot of wattage. They really don't have to worry about someone interfering with them when they're on. So by having a wide IF in the radio, the receiver, they get full audio. So if a guy's got a really good microphone, a really good amp, he sounds beautiful. He sounds like a broadcast station. And you pick those guys up on a ham receiver, and it's not going to sound as good. It sounds good, but not booming great. You know, like if you have like a NC57 and you have an AM phone guy on, you got a good speaker on it, you can actually hear things in the background in the guy's house. It's just, it's broadcast, almost broadcast quality. And that's why these AM phone guys, they have certain equipment that they talk up. Then the reason is, it's the radio is not as narrow as a communication radio, a newer one, because the newer ones might have dual or triple conversion, and every time you convert the with an oscillator, you in a converter inside the circuit, it gets narrower. The bandwidth gets narrower, and the audio gets squeezed or pinched or just not distorted. And that's what it is. There's certain things that just keep sitting in the background, and you keep saying, why? And why go after this stuff? Figure out why. And then every once in a while you'll find a guy that just says, well, the bandwidth of that old radio is set up the best possible bandwidth at that generation when they made it. Now, after they made radios after that, they started making the radios dual conversion, and they were narrower. And narrow is good when you're doing contest in CW or sideband. But when you want to use that receiver for AM phone, it's not a good choice. And that's what's going on. And no, I would never sell my old radio. Well, the modern ones, the only way you're going to get good sound out of them is to go in and change the crystal filters, if you could, and make them wider. And crystal filters have a weird thing with the skirt. If you get into crystal filters, they'll say it's 6 kilohertz wide, and that they pick the skirt. Go read up on skirts. They pick it and they're kind of cheating. Everybody's cheating and trying to sell you crap. Where the old radios, they can't cheat you because they were made years ago, and they were made a certain way, and they were quality. And now people recommend those radios if you're doing AM phone. But most of this stuff that I tell you about, there's no real use for it. It just gets me thinking. And a few of you that follow it, you're getting into maybe toroid coils. And a toroid coil is a cheap way of making a smaller coil for a receiver. It's not a, oh, they're really good. They got high Q, not as good as a hand wound or wave wound coil. But if you're going to make it by hand real fast and it's simple to make, yeah, it's a great little coil. And I have them. And I made a direct conversion set. I made a dual conversion radio with them. And it's just so much easier to wind a toroid. I showed you my tool that I use, which came out of the Radio Amateur's Handbook, 1981. It's in there, but I made mine longer and thinner. And I added a little hole to hold the wire. I saw it in my mind, saw a picture of it. It stayed in there, and then one day I got toroid coils, and I just made the shuttle. They call it a shuttle. It's named after the shuttle that goes back and forth on a loom. All right, if you really want to know where some of this stuff comes from. And I was telling you about you could stack 2 toroid coils and wind them, and you won't get more Q. You get more inductance in a smaller space, in a pinch, but a toroid coil is better than another coil that you might buy that's multi-layer. It's going to have better Q. But they don't even list it. If you look at the specifications for a T50-2, they have this data page you can bring down, and I'm looking for, like, high Q of 10 or 15. No, 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 no. Yeah, no. They just say the words high Q, and you're like, oh wow, high Q. What does that mean? What does that mean? And it's advertising, all right. And but as we go along in electronics, and my thing is I follow circuitry, you can see how they went crappier and crappier and crappier. And you look at a national, like an NC57, the price, versus a Hellcrafters, is it S40? S40 has no choke in it. It's got those shitty little freaking IF cans. What else? It's got a whole, it doesn't have the gear system. You can get a national NC57 with a gear on the main tuning, and it's tight. It's got an anti-backlash, where the S40 has a dial cord. And and then there was something else going on. The IF cans are different. The three IF cans are different, where the IF cans in the S40 are all the same IF can. So they didn't try to change the impedances as they came in from the antenna and the first detector, the converter to the first IF. The NC57's got a slicker first IF. It's got 3 windings instead of 2. It's just a better radio, and it was actually a cheaper radio than the Hellcrafters. But the problem is, Hellcrafters had more advertising, and the public is stupid. And you got the people that own the NC57s and the Hellcrafters S40, and they just say the NC57 just has a hotter front end. Well, go look why. I did. That's what I do. Why is an SDR radio so bad? Well, it's got no real front end. It's got 1 farad bead per band. As you switch to bands, it's got a 1 farad bead for the band pass. That's shit. And so, that's because you don't have the Russian one. It's the same circuit, the Russian one. And then if you go look, they've been adding stuff to it that they didn't give you the first time. That's what real crap is. When they give you something as a new model that they should have gave you the first time. And Windows is sort of like that. The new version has what they should have gave you the first time. And you're out of your mind. But everything is in a downward spiral. All the hobbies are being eliminated by cell phones. That's what people do. They walk along and watch them. They're addicted to the cell phone. And I go to yard sales, I told you, and there's people that actually shut that thing off when they're doing something. And the other people, you're at a yard sale, you could rob whatever you want. They're so into that cell phone, and you're asking, what's the price of this? And they don't want to look up. They're like, like that. But the people that walk in the park and stuff, a lot of them I walk with, they turn the cell phone off. It's enough already. Their hobby is going for a walk. Some people go fishing, and they shut the cell phone off. And then some people, they're on the cell phone. And I was there one time with a guy, and he had a really big fish on it. But his girlfriend called him, and he was supposed to be somewhere else. And he lost the fish because it was either get the fish and let his girlfriend know he's fishing where he wasn't supposed to be, or lose the fish. But I've seen it. I go out and walk, and I talk to people about hobbies and all that. And my thing is, when I see something I don't know, and I ask myself why, and then I'm like, don't think about it. Don't think about it. And then little by little, I'm like, well, where is that information? It's high Q. What do you mean by high Q? Yeah, it's high Q compared to a coil that you're never going to use. It's great. It's just great. But I just wanted to update you on some of the stuff. But I had trouble saying toroidal core. That's what it is. We might say toroid core, but it's toroidal core. And once you put in the extra letters, you get more hits. And the same with Q factor. Remember Q? He used to show up on Star Trek all the time. That's how I remember Q factor. And it's just as mysterious as Q. And once you understand, a bigger coil, if done correctly, has more Q than a smaller coil. And the Hellcrafter radios have a tinier coil in the front end, and they have less Q, they have less signal, and the front end is not hot as the NC57. I figured it all out now. I own it. I never bought an S40. I had repaired them. They're garbage. They're absolute garbage. And and the only thing worse than that is I think it's an S38 is the one that used to sell in two guys. And you'll see guys, I want to rebuild this, and some guy says, throw it out. It's a piece of shit. It's an AA5 radio with a different set of coils in it. It's just junk. I think that's it. All right, that's it.